and murder. Attempted murder and murder. It works. Like a big fat black circle.
The woman that you just saw laughing and joking with police officers is one of the most warped and sadistic killers in Great British history. Joanne Dennehy was a woman who went against what society maybe saw as normal, but not to an extent where a 31-year-old mother of two could suddenly become a serial killer. A 12-day killing spree in which Joanne Dennehy would not only murder multiple men, but attempt to murder even more. A series of violent offences taking place in one of the safer areas of the UK, and therefore a terrified group of local residents. This is the story of a woman with a lot more wrong with her than just the violent fantasies that she would go on to carry out. This is the story of the Peterborough ditch murders, but more commonly known as the case of Joanne Dennehy.
This episode contains graphic details and information about one of the most sadistic criminals in UK history. We are going to try our best to cover this in a sensitive way, basically to respect the victims and their families in what was a horrific moment of their lives. Now, just remember this. We are two normal blokes with access to information about this case as if any normal person would do, publicly available information. And so remember, this information could in itself be fallible. Now, without further ado, Joey, why don't you tell me a little bit more about how this story starts?
Yeah, well, I'll take you to where the story starts, and that is in Peterborough. Peterborough is, I think, about 70 miles north of London. It, in my opinion, is definitely one of the safer places of Great Britain to live. So Peterborough, it's sort of more towards the East Anglian coast going up that way. Yep. And that part of Great Britain is a part of England that is very, very safe and nowhere near as densely populated as London and the Midlands areas and whatnot. And yeah, it's just a part of England where most people feel safe to go about their business, to be able to go out on their own at night and things like that. It's not somewhere which you would, you know, imagine is a crime-ridden area. And the area of Peterborough was home to a man named Lukasz Slaboszewski. Now, for the sake of the episode, being that Slaboszewski is a little bit of a tongue twister, especially for me, we are going to refer to him as Lukasz for this episode. Now, Josh, why don't you tell me a little bit more about Lukasz?
So Lukasz was known as a bit of a fun-loving guy. He was known as the sort of life and soul of his family. And it was his sister, actually, that described him as that. And at the time, he was 39. So he'd come over from Poland into the UK, and basically he was trying to start a new life, trying to start new opportunities. His sister, I believe, was actually trained to be a lawyer, wasn't she?
She was, and she was living in London at the time. So obviously work opportunities, there's just way more there. There's way more jobs going. And his sister was really, really doing well in her career after coming over from Poland. Whereas Lukasz was a bit more going from job to job, doing sort of manual labour work and stuff like that. And obviously in the area of Peterborough is probably not as many jobs going. So career-wise, not doing as well as his sister, but, you know, still doing well for himself over here.
Overall, he was happy though, wasn't he? It wasn't like he was in one of those things where he didn't have a steady job and he was finding life tough. It seemed by all accounts that he was pretty much in a good place. So he goes to a pub, and over the course of going to that pub, he meets a person, a young lady called Joanne at this pub. And as you can imagine, you know, starts chatting to loads of people. As we say, fun-loving guy. Obviously, you know, it was very easy to chat to and get to know people.
And not only that, the woman that he had met was a woman that has been described as so many as a woman that men gravitated towards. And Lukasz was no different, was he? He quite quickly developed an attraction, I'd say.
Absolutely that. And it was on the 19th of March 2013 where Lukasz has obviously exchanged phone numbers with Joanne, and he was having a lot of contact with her. And basically he got a message which I think most young men, or even a 39-year-old man, might be tempted by. And that message was, words to the effect of, I'm naked, and why don't you come round and show me a good time? Was that basically what it said?
Pretty much it, yeah. And so much so that Lukasz, after making his way over to the address that Joanne has given him, just before he steps inside of the bedsit where Joanne's living, he actually sends a text message to, I think, a friend back home in Poland.
In Polish.
And it's in Polish, and it's translated to "Life is beautiful." However, that would be the last message that anyone ever received off of Lukasz. Now, before we go into the events of that evening, let's take it back to the woman that he was exchanging text messages with, the 31-year-old mother of two, Joanne Dennehy.
So Joanne was born in August of 1982, and by all accounts, she had a very normal early life, and it was very much disparate from a life of what you'd expect from a serial killer. In fact, she had no history of violence or abuse or any other trauma in her early childhood. In fact, she had a pretty pampered life.
Yeah, she was actually born into a very wealthy family. It was reported that she grew up in a house that cost 325 grand, but obviously she was born in 1982, so a 325 grand property in St Albans.
That's like £1 million property, like, at least, to be fair. And also the property, like, basically context behind this is I lived in St Albans for a long time, and so I know it very well. St Albans is probably one of the most desirable parts of Hertfordshire, which is the county in which I grew up in. Imaginable. Basically, it's a commuter town, very well sought after. You can get into London really quickly, and house prices in St Albans are absolutely ridiculous. For like a 2 up, 2 down, like, couple of bedrooms, small property, terrace house, you're talking like 600-700 grand now in like today's money.
And her life's very, very normal up until the age of like 15, 16. Now, all children, kids, teenagers, whatever you want to call them, do experience the change around that time, and that can be behavioural, it can be experimentational. You know what I mean? You can start doing things that maybe you hadn't done before. That's when drink and substances and stuff like that start to come into play. But up until then, do you know what Joanne was sort of going through her schooling years with the aim to become? Do you know what career path she actually wanted?
Yeah, I mean, she was aspiring to be a lawyer.
Isn't that mad? She was aspiring, and it'll get madder as the story goes on, but she was aspiring to be a lawyer. Right? Around 15, 16 years old is when she begins to start having intimate relationships with local men, and stuff starts to take a turn for the worse, a darker turn, should I say. She starts to drink a lot of alcohol. She starts to take a lot of substances. It's actually said that around that time, she becomes known to mental health and vulnerable person authorities in her late teens, and especially into her early 20s. She's now by this point molded into quite a violent young woman with sort of history of attacking people, and just not the sort of character that you thought that her life was destined to grow into when you read of that sort of cushy upbringing in comparison to other people we cover on this channel. Yeah,
and it seems like alcohol was very much the fuel for that violence, wasn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like of everything that I've been able to describe, when she was on alcohol and on the substances, that was the thing that really set it off. But very interestingly, she met a guy called John Traynor. Effectively, she starts a very serious romantic relationship with this guy. Now, he's actually done an interview with This Morning afterwards, where he basically described their relationship at the start of it, where basically he said that they were homeless for a period of time at the very start of their relationship. And again, he very much sort of like not fueled the lifestyle, but they were in that lifestyle together, weren't they? Like, they were drinking, they were boozing, but everything changed pretty soon after they first met each other, because Joanne actually fell pregnant, didn't she?
Yes, and let me tell you, right, when a woman, or even your missus as a man, when your missus falls pregnant, stuff changes for both of you, for the man and for the woman. And it's kind of a little bit like, I always compare stuff to fighting type scenarios, right? It's fight or flight. So for me, when I found out the news and it was unexpected that I was going to be a father, and that, my missus was expecting our firstborn, I shit myself, right? And all of a sudden it was like plummeted downhill during the pregnancy and whatever. And I was like, I think I was trying to get all my fun in before it came type thing, right? But as soon as I held that baby, I was, and this is when I was like really skint and everything like that. I decided, mate, I need to get rich. I need to do something. I need to grow up. I need to achieve something now. And by all accounts, that is exactly what happened with John Trainer. He really, really came of age and he turned into a really, really good dad at this time. You know, he was very caring. He made sure that he wasn't working the odd day here and there and mooching about from place to place. He's working hard and he's providing. And he really, really did have a change. But one person that didn't was Joanne, by all accounts, the baby's mother. And John went on to say this. He went on to say that she was still drinking, she was still taking substances, and probably most importantly of all, when we go on to see where this story goes, she was still being violent towards John as well, wasn't she? Yeah,
basically there was one thing where a neighbour had seen them together. They were having a blazing row, which by all accounts wasn't a sort of a one-off. Apparently this was happening quite regularly. And effectively Joanne chased him out of the house with a wooden cricket bat. And to say that, that was a one-off occasion isn't true either. I think violence was very much part of their life and their relationship and very much part of Joanne's sort of daily thinking, really, wasn't it?
Well, it might be the same neighbour. It could be a different neighbour. But I've actually read a news article from a neighbour that was interviewed in the aftermath of these events. And she said that Joanne and John were at completely different ends of the spectrum. John was the sort of man that would see you carrying your rubbish out to your bins and he would run across the road and help you do it, right? John was approachable. John was personable. However, she purely described Joanne as being horrible. And in this neighbour's words, Joanne was constantly off her face on drinks and substances.
Which we have to describe it as that.
We get in a bit of trouble if we use the other D word for that one.
And that wasn't just the only occasion in which neighbours thought was slightly unusual as well. There was another occasion in which, you can imagine these two daughters that they have, long flowing locks, normal young girls that would go to school. There's one occasion,
especially the older one, by the way, because just to jump in here, there is about a 7-year age gap between the two children. So
there you go. Big difference. So she saw one of these kids and one day she'd had really long hair. The next day, the head had been shaven effectively. So this young girl had effectively walked out going to school with a shaved head, which feels a bit unusual, doesn't it?
As I say, this is a kid who around this time is probably 7.5, 8 years old, something like that. I don't have the exact age, but if you're a neighbour and one day you all of a sudden see this kid who's quite innocent, she's got a nice dad, you're a bit not too sure about the mum, and you see her walking along holding the mum's hand with a completely shaved head. Now, we've actually, ironically, spoke quite a bit about completely shaved heads on this channel in a few true crime cases recently. And one of the reasons why, because can we both agree, it's not normal for a child to shave their head.
No.
That's not normal.
Of either gender. Per se, really, There you go. You wouldn't, not a young kid.
Now, that's us assuming that it was that child's choice to shave their head, right? Joanne didn't have a shaved head, by the way. Joanne had long hair. Joanne didn't have a shaved head. So it's not like her mum's got a shaved head and she's kind of looked at him, but
the little kids copied it.
Dad's not got a shaved head. And even if he did, as a young girl, you don't normally copy your dad's haircut. It would lead me to believe, and I have no evidence and anything to back this up on, it would lead me to believe that someone shaved the head of that child. Now, there's two reasons why someone might shave a head of a child, or I suppose there's three. The first one is that your child asked for it and you thought, I'll let my child express themselves and look however they want, potentially, maybe. The other two reasons are, one, you're doing it out of cruelty, and two, you're doing it to try and get rid of any evidence of something. Now, knowing that Joanne was into alcohol and substances, we don't know whether they were left around the house or anything like that, but you can see where I'm going with this.
I didn't even think about this.
There could be a real suspicion that that child could have accidentally taken something of Joanne's possibly, and therefore that's why that child's head was shaved.
Proper wrong.
To avoid, any detection of anything being in their system. That could be the reason.
It could be. And the next part of the story that we get to is in 2007, Joanne has a second daughter. So Joanne and John have their second child together. And I think this was the moment, really, the catalyst for John, in which he goes, there's something just not right about this household that I'm bringing up this daughter in, and both daughters now. Like, we're seeing violence consistently. We're potentially seeing neglect. Like, I think it's questioned how much Joanne actually really even loved the daughters, right?
It is. And I think naturally, over time, couples grow, right?
Yeah.
And you either grow in the same direction, you either grow upwards together, or you grow apart. And by this point, I think that John has grown up into an adult. He's a father of two, right? And Joanne, if anything, is regressing.
I would say not just regressing, but potentially moving into a new phase of her life in terms of her own mental illness. Because I think that the final straw, from what I've heard from John, by the way, was an incident in which Joanne basically pulls a knife out in front of her kids. She stabs it into the carpet directly in front of John while screaming, "I wish I could effing kill someone." So, like, it feels to me like while there were various straws, while there were various moments in which John knew something was wrong, I feel like this was one of those ones where he was just like, I've got to get out and I've got to move on from this situation. And basically that's what he did, wasn't it?
That's what he does. But at the same time as this, what I would note is John doesn't move, across the country. John doesn't move and cut off all contact. And John doesn't secretively do it and all of a sudden up and leave. John moves 15 miles up the road, basically, to Derbyshire. 15 miles, that's not that far.
Stone's throw.
That's honestly...
Especially in that part of the world where everyone's driving.
Exactly. Yeah. And in that part of the world, what I said was it's nowhere near as dense as London. So 15 miles. In London, fucking hell, 15 miles, you could be driving
basically
for
around the corner,
4 hours or something
yeah.
because of the traffic. 15 miles there is like...
It's around the corner.
It's like, at worst, you're probably looking at a 25 half-hour drive.
At worst.
Yeah? So there was every chance, in my opinion, that when John left and obviously took the kids, I don't know whether there was even a custody battle. If there was, because of Joanne's, state, she wouldn't have won it. But I don't think there even was one. 15 miles suggests to me that there was every chance that Joanne could have maintained a relationship with her two daughters, but she didn't choose to do that.
No.
Did she?
No,
she moved herself
as
well in the other direction to Peterborough.
Which again is a lot further away. And again, it just shows that what I can't believe this from a maternal element of this is she obviously just didn't care about the kids at all. Like what's clear is she effectively abandoned the kids, didn't she? She wanted to start a new life. And indeed, she did start a new life with, would you say a partner? She definitely met someone else.
Partner in crime.
Yeah.
And I don't use the term in the way that we use it affectionately sometimes. I'm on about a real partner in crime. Now, this man's name was Gary Richards, right?
Yeah.
But he was known as Stretch.
Which
right?
he coined himself, by the way. He called himself Stretch. And the reason why he called himself Stretch is that this guy actually suffered with gigantism. Like he was a 7'3" geezer, absolutely massive, like big head, like just strong guy in general, right? Like you're the kind of guy you see on the street and you go, fucking hell, that is a serious unit of a man.
To put it into perspective, Tyson Fury, me and you have seen him up and close, right?
6'8"?
He's massive, isn't he?
Is he 6'8"?
He says he's 6'9".
Okay.
I think he's 6'8".
Okay.
Yeah.
6'8" is still pretty massive.
And he was massive, wasn't he? Yeah. Mate, we were stood next to Usyk. Usyk's massive. He's 6'3". This man is 7'3".
Ridiculous.
Mental.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Right? So to say he's a presence would be an understatement. Now, Gary is actually a father and was in a relationship with the mother of those children, but he, much like Joanne, had basically fallen on hard times. And upon meeting Joanne, she became a really, really, in his eyes, probably like a positive distraction in his life. It was finally someone that, I don't know, was someone, that actually seemed to care about him, which he was wanting in his life. He didn't feel he had that. Can
we just say, by the way, at this point, I think it's important to point out, it's not like this guy Gary is holding down a regular job. He was a petty criminal. He liked, doing a few burglaries here and there all around town. And quite frankly, he was
Of course
known
he
for
would.
doing
Don't
it.
even need a ladder. You just pop in the top window, stretch your arm over, and take what you want.
Did you hear about the story where he robbed an office building?
No.
And have you heard what he managed to get away with?
No.
So basically, he goes into this office building. He tries to get loads of computers and everything. Walks out. The only thing he walks out with was a chocolate bar. This isn't a joke. This is a true story. Twirl. Was it worth it for a twirl?
A white Bueno.
Yeah, it might have been worth
White
it.
Bueno or something like that, maybe.
Do you know the fun part of this is he left fingerprints all over the office. He was actually found, arrested, and convicted of burglary for stealing a chocolate bar.
The worst thing was the fingerprints were so easily identifiable because they had chocolate all over them. So I
thought you were going to say because they were massive.
Yeah.
It doesn't really take a fucking genius, does it, to figure out who's left those fingerprints?
Oh, size 24 feet. Who's robbed this place?
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, what we will do now is we'll bring you back to the night that Lukasz turns up at Joanne's apartment. And obviously we needed to tell you a little bit about Joanne and a little bit about Stretch, who is Gary Richards, obviously Gary Stretch he's referred to. We'll refer to him as Stretch here. We needed to give you the background on them two before we tell you about the night that Lukasz turns up to meet Joanne for what he believes is going to be a night of romantic fun.
Yes, he's expecting a wild night. Obviously, as we say, he's received that text message that basically Joanne is ready and raring to go for a wild night. And I think he might have put his foot down in his car, and I think he might have been down there pretty sharpish, to be fair. So apparently, this is disputed, but apparently that was on the night of March 19th, 2013. And basically, he gets into the house and quite frankly, what goes on behind closed doors, Joey, is often disputed. So you might have a different recollection of this, but of what I've heard, this is how the night went. They start having a few drinks. They are sort of getting on very well. You know, the night is going from one to the other. The romantic evening is progressing. A blindfold is placed on Lukasz's face, and this is where he thinks the night of romance is very much about to begin. But it takes a very, very dark turn from there. Effectively, what Joanne does is from the moment he puts on that blindfold and lays down, she stabs him straight through the chest, effectively. And quite unimaginably, I don't know how this even happens. Apparently he doesn't pass away straight away. Apparently there is a bit of a scuffle and a bit of a coming together, apparently. But straight away, Joanne carries on stabbing him. And soon enough, Lukasz collapses and then passes away. So, having just committed the first murder of her life, you might think she'll react in a fairly shocked way. Won't really know what to do. Unfortunately, that's not really how it went with Joanne. She was quite proud of this killing, wasn't she?
She was. So much so, the first thing she wants to do is she wants to call up her best friend Stretch and let him know all about it. Now, she actually calls him to come over and to help her basically, get rid of the body. Now, I say get rid of the body. They put the body in a wheelie bin directly outside the front of the house. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a cleanup job that goes on inside.
Little bit. I wouldn't say they were forensically trained, these two.
No. And they put the body in a wheelie bin. Now that body, actually, it's disputed how long it stays in that wheelie bin.
It's not long. Yeah, it's not too long though. We're not talking about weeks.
We're not talking about weeks.
We're potentially talking about days.
Couple of days. Yeah, couple of days. Now in the meantime, right, they are actually quite proud of this. Both Joanne and Stretch take pictures of the body in the wheelie bin, and there's even an incident when Joanne spots a teenage girl on the sort of estate that they're living on.
Apparently she's a friend, by the way, this teenage girl, but disputed that.
She's known to Joanne. She's known to Joanne. She calls her over and apparently shows her the body in the bin.
Why didn't the teenager go straight to the police at that point?
Because it's at this point that apparently Gary Stretch warns the teenager off and tells the teenager that they need to keep quiet, basically. And obviously, because of his presence and, you know, status of in the area maybe, and Joanne, who a lot of people are scared of, by the way, that teenager does keep quiet. And the family of Lukasz aren't that concerned because it's not, you know, it's not normal. It's not abnormal. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that he could go a week,
couple of weeks,
10 days, couple of weeks without speaking to his family back home or his sister in London. That's not that weird. That's not that out of the ordinary behaviour. So there's no alarm bell raised, is there?
No.
In essence, there isn't really a missing person.
No, I think the fact that he was a 39-year-old man. And look, people have different relationships with their families, don't they? But I think if I hadn't texted my mum or dad for a week or so, I don't think they'd be immediately calling the police. Do you know what I mean? I think there's different people react in a different way. So yeah, effectively, no one was searching for Lukasz, which is incredibly sad, really. But what Joanne does do immediately is move out of this bedsit where she was staying. And luckily for her, she actually knows someone called Kevin Lee who might be able to help her with an alternative accommodation.
Now, Kevin Lee is actually the man who Joanne was renting the property off in the first place, right? Now, obviously, she's killed a man in this property. She pretty much needs to get out of there, right? We say that they've cleaned it up, but it's not, it's not a forensic sweep by any means. And she calls Kevin Lee and she tells Kevin Lee that she needs to move, right? Now, Kevin Lee is a man that owns a letting agency. And upon first meeting Joanne, himself and his business partner, who were known to deal in the low end of lettings, basically. So they're dealing with a lot of people who have maybe come out of prison, a lot of people who have maybe come out of rehab, a lot of families who are very hard strapped for cash and things like that. And they're dealing in that sort of market. They're not renting out £1 million properties and stuff like this. And even so, that they do deal with people who have been to prison and things like that, Kevin Lee's business partner immediately said that he had a bad feeling about Joanne when she walked into their office that day. And his advice was that we should not go near this woman, right? He had a bad feeling about her. But Kevin Lee is a man who was described by his son, actually, as being someone who always wanted to see the good in people.
And help people.
Being someone that wants to help people. Being someone that doesn't believe that anyone is better or worse than anyone else. He wants everyone to have an even chance. And when Joanne tells him her almost sob story, in a way, of why she ended up in prison, Kevin Lee all of a sudden feels a right to help this woman. And that's...
By the way, we haven't said why. Do you know why she did end up in prison?
Yes.
I don't know the answer to this.
Yes. So Joanne was in prison because she had murdered her father, who used to abuse her. That's a lie. That is what Joanne told Kevin Lee.
Is that the story, really?
Yeah. So the story that Joanne
But had she been to prison?
She'd been to prison. She hadn't murdered her father. Her father's alive now.
Yeah, I was going to say.
He never abused her.
I was going to say, but I don't know the reason why she actually was in prison.
She grew up in a fucking £1 million house in St Albans. Her father weren't abusing her.
Yeah. Fucking hell. Yeah, fair enough.
They were good parents to her. They were good parents to her. But she went to Kevin Lee and she says to him that I've got out of a prison stretch that actually was for manslaughter, and the judge deemed it as manslaughter because it was self-defense, and I murdered my father who was abusive towards me. Now, Kevin Lee is charmed to an extent by Joanne, and he can see the good in her, and he actually respects her honesty and sees an opportunity to help a woman who not only had fallen on hard times, but had convinced him that she was reformed character. So despite the obvious and the business partner of Kevin Lee saying don't give her a chance, Kevin Lee does give her a chance, doesn't he? And
I wouldn't say he just gives her a chance. Yeah. Things go from bad to worse for Kevin Lee. Let's put this into context. He's a married father of two, and he's got this business that he's very happily working away with his business partner. His life seems very settled and calm, but he begins sleeping with Joanne. She gets her claws into him quite early. She charms him, and they start a sexual relationship, don't they? They
start a sexual relationship, but they also start what I would deem to be almost a trade-off. And that trade-off being that it's reported that Joanne doesn't pay rent after they start having sex. And she actually moves from property to property. So as we've already learned so far in the story that we're telling you guys, she's moved to 2 different properties, right? And she had done this a lot. She had lived in, some people are reporting up to like 10 different properties that Kevin Lee's letting agency looked after. And that there to me would make me believe that there was some kind of trade-off going on.
But it also wasn't just that she was doing, is it? So obviously you just think now that there's a sexual element to this as well. But basically she was working for him, wasn't she? So she was effectively working as an enforcer almost. Like she would go around and collect rent for other tenants, wouldn't she? She'd go and bang doors down, and he would see her almost like a bit of a bouncer, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he would. And she was, they were very, very close by all accounts. And look, again, it's very, very hard when we cover these cases. You never want to speak in ill light of someone that's, deceased and has tragically been murdered and whose life should have never been cut short in such a way. But as the story goes on, Kevin Lee himself is someone that the police do have certain suspicions about. So he's the man that she's renting the property off, and obviously Joanne calls Kevin Lee up and says to him that she needs to go into a new property. Now, she is housed in a new property, literally just days away, another bedsit, and this is basically a big building where everyone's got their own room, but there's like a mutual bathroom, there's a mutual
shared living room, kitchen,
almost like a uni hall.
Yeah, basically like a uni halls. Yeah. They were sharing with various people, and these aren't young people either. They're people from all different backgrounds and ages, all in one place.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The criteria is people that have probably fallen on hard times, isn't it?
Yeah,
and a man that was staying in this bedsit was a man named John Chapman.
Yes.
Josh, why don't you tell me a little bit about John Chapman?
So John was described as a kind, harmless and inoffensive man. So basically, apparently, he goes in this bedsit, he goes in this house, and he paid his rent on time, he kept himself to himself, and, he did what he needed to do to get by. But living there was actually disputed. Apparently, I heard and saw rumours that he was basically having parties and he was being quite loud as well. So a lot of people described him as a very kind and fine man, but apparently there was also this other side to him.
I think they are quite conflicting rumours, because the first thing I would say is I heard rumours that the whole house were basically having parties and stuff. You've got to remember, when I say falling on hard times, a lot of the time I mean drink and substance abuse. But I would say, from what I was looking into, John was described as a man that, although he had no sort of close family or friends and nothing really tying him down, he wasn't described as a violent man. No. He was described more so as someone that I think people would feel a little bit of sympathy for, a little bit of empathy for, maybe. Obviously, he had fallen on hard times, 56 years old. Yeah. He's an alcoholic. He's got no one around him. He had served as a sailor in the Falklands, so no doubt he'd probably seen action
some stuff
in there. And we all know that a lot of people that have served in any type of war have PTSD and things like that. And a lot of them do go on to become alcoholics and whatnot. So, yeah, definitely someone that could have done with a bit of luck in his life, maybe.
Yeah, and also potentially, someone to help him out in a time in which he was probably at his lowest and potentially quite lonely.
Which brings us to the evening of March 29th, 2013, where John Chapman has both drunk alcohol, apparently quite high percentage alcohol, and he's taken substances to a point where, although conscious, he's pretty much incapacitated, isn't he? And he's lying in the front room, the shared sort of communal area, on a sofa in the bedsit where both Joanne, John and many other residents are living.
Basically, Joanne, I should say, immediately at this point stabs him again, right through the chest. And unlike, her first victim, there wasn't really a struggle. This guy is, very much under the influence, couldn't really do anything and couldn't protect himself at all. In fact, there were no discerning markings that he'd protected himself in self-defense in any single way. So what is quite clear is that he passed away very quickly. And obviously, Joanne, the first thing she does is call up Stretch to come and help her.
She calls up Stretch. Stretch comes round. He comes round with the intention to clean the house, to move the body and whatnot. But there's a problem, isn't there? And the problem is, to move the body, I'm guessing you're going to need a vehicle. They don't have a car, Joanne and Stretch, right? I would say they don't really have means to be able to go and buy a car, right? They're not, they're not living in bedsits for no reason, okay? And Joanne isn't, she hasn't got the working relationship that she has with Kevin Lee for no reason. It's because they haven't got the money to be able to go and buy a car. Josh, who do you think helps them get their hands on a car?
I don't know. Tell me.
Kevin Lee is the man that helps Joanne get her hands on the vehicle.
So does Kevin Lee know what's gone on? Like, has she just said to him, I need a vehicle, can you let me borrow one?
It was reported in the court case that the police believed that Kevin Lee, and this is the wording, knew what the vehicle was going to be used for.
Really?
That's what the police apparently believed.
Okay.
That Kevin Lee knew what the vehicle was going to be used for. Obviously, you have to look at Kevin Lee to an extent and say, this woman was by all accounts an enforcer for Kevin Lee. You know, when tenants were late with their rent, she would go around and she would scare them for him. He knew that this woman had violent tendencies, and he knew that this woman had moved out of one of his properties and needed to move out like that at a drop of a hat. That, for me, is enough for me to not determine whether he knew, whether he didn't know, but it's enough for me to determine that the police probably have some weight to their theory that he may have known what the car was being used for. Okay.
Yep. So he drives over, right? And they meet up. He doesn't just leave the car, does he? Like they basically see each other, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, we've tried to find out the exact details, but one of the things that you'll have noticed while I'm researching this case is the details are very conflicting and they're very sparse, right? But we believe that Kevin Lee was the one to drive the car over, and the car was then used by two men, Stretch and a man named Leslie Layton. Now, Leslie Layton is another man that is living in the halfway house at the time. Halfway house, by the way, is a terminology that we use to describe these sort of
transient homes, effectively. Yeah.
More or
You're not
less.
in there for a long time, and you're with a lot of other people, basically.
So Leslie Layton and Stretch discard of the bodies of Lukasz and John Chapman. They actually placed them in ditches near the outskirts of Peterborough. Now, the following day, Kevin Lee is at work. He receives a text message from Joanne Dennehy, basically saying to him that she wants to meet up and have intercourse. Right? Obviously, she's a bit more raunchy in the messages. And they're actually quite explicit, the messages, right? And Kevin Lee is at work at the time, and he decides that it would be for the best to head over there.
I heard, by the way, he showed someone these messages, and they were very graphic.
I heard that he showed the entire office the messages.
Yeah. So that's a bit fucked.
Yeah. And obviously, if you want to have a look into what the messages said, they were quite graphic, and they're definitely not the sort of thing, they're not the sort of kink that I would want my workforce knowing that I'm into.
I'm personally not into it. Yeah, I'm personally not into it myself, but each their own. Do you know what I mean?
Now, this is the point that makes me have an element of doubt upon what the police believed, which is that Kevin Lee knew what that vehicle was being used for. Because all I will say is this: if you knew that vehicle the day before was being used to discard of two bodies that this woman has killed, you are going to great lengths for a bit of hanky-panky, aren't you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you really are. You're doing too much for it.
Like,
you're not. I mean, you really. There's desperate and there's this.
There's
gagging for it.
Going and doing conveniently a bit of a dog, which is what Joanne is, or there's going into the arms of a killer.
How far have you driven for a night of fun, Joe? Be honest. How long have you gone?
Not all the way to Peterborough.
Yeah, there you go.
No. But no, obviously that actually makes me think that Kevin Lee didn't know what the car was being used for, because it would be a great length for a father of two with a wife at home to leave work midday. It's apparently around 2 p.m. or something, right? To leave work midday on a Saturday to go and do that. It would be a great length if he did know. But instead of being met by a woman who's wanting a bit of fun, he's actually met by Joanne with much, much darker plans. Immediately, as soon as he walks in to the bedsit, Joanne actually stabs Kevin 5 times, but Kevin actually fights back and he does put up a little bit of a struggle. However, after a short amount of time, the wounds and the loss of blood just becomes way too much. Kevin Lee falls forward and he becomes the third victim of Joanne at this point.
But what's clear for Joanne is that she wasn't just happy to murder this man. She also wanted to humiliate him as well. And obviously we saw some of that in terms of the messages that were exchanged, and you can look those up yourself, as Joey says. But she also dresses him up in women's clothing, basically a sequined dress, effectively.
A black sequin dress. And what she does is she dresses him up in that so that when Leslie Layton and Stretch get there, they can see it, they can have a good laugh, they can get their mobiles out and take pictures, which is exactly what they do. And then they get rid of the body. So basically what happens is Leslie Layton then takes Kevin Lee's car. He drives it somewhere, he burns it out, which in effect gets rid of the sort of DNA evidence. And it's said that Jodie and Stretch then go and get rid of Kevin Lee's body. Now, they place it in a ditch. It's still dressed in women's clothing, and they place it in a way that would suggest that they did want it to be found. They hadn't hidden this body in the ditch. And in a nutshell, they placed this body rear end up. So head down, rear end up. Not only in a way that they would probably want this body to be stumbled across, they would want whoever stumbled across this body, hopefully someone of age at least, right? But whoever stumbled across this body was going to be not only met by something horrific from a standpoint of someone that's been murdered, but they sexualized the murder, didn't they?
Yeah, not just about how it was discovered, the person seeing it, but also humiliating and having control over that person that was the victim, I think, as well, to be fair.
Now, after this, they know that unlike the other two men, people are looking for Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee is the owner of a business. He's a father of two. He's a husband. People are going to be looking for him. And not only that, what did Kevin Lee do before he left the office?
Told the office. He told everyone where he was going.
Where he was going. And therefore, the second that Kevin Lee is murdered, Joanne is a woman who is wanted. Now, her and Stretch, after that, actually hide out for a few days, still in the Peterborough area. But after a few days, they take the 140-odd mile round trip to Hereford. And this is actually an area that Stretch had spent some time in and therefore knows quite well, doesn't he?
Yeah. So effectively, they start, I don't know, like a Bonnie and Clyde sort of on the run sort of relationship, don't they? Yeah. And in fact, she was quite infatuated with Bonnie and Clyde. So that's a relevant analogy, I would say. And also they were caught on CCTV footage, like just walking through shopping centres as if everything was completely normal. But
flirting with shop assistants.
Yeah, this is the thing. There's like footage where she's saying turn around because she's complimenting a shop assistants and their bum. Yeah. Effectively. Like she had this way of flirting and complimenting people and making people feel good about themselves, didn't she? Often a theory and a threat of a psychopath, that is as well.
People were very much attracted to Joanne, but not only attracted, like they became obsessed with her. So now when they go down to Hereford, by the way, they rob a house on the way. They do a burglary on the way.
Sell some goods.
They sell some goods.
Off the house, yeah.
Yeah, meet up with some other criminals. They actually even get one man in the car with them who, it's proven in court, didn't actually know what,
was going down.
Who he was travelling with and what they had done.
Yeah.
And didn't know what was about to happen. Because when they're driving around the Hereford area, all of a sudden, this man that they have in the back with them sees Joanne pull a knife out and tell Stretch that she needs another one.
Yeah. This guy's called Mark Lloyd. Is that his name? Yeah. So basically, this is where the spree of killing really kicks into gear. Effectively, what Joanne had said to Stretch is that she wanted to continue this, and she actually wanted to find the victims. She actually mentioned in particular she wanted to find a victim with a dog.
Yeah.
For some reason. I don't know why she did that.
Dog walkers, and they must be male. No women, no children is what she said.
Yeah, and the first person that she actually finds is a man called Robin Bereza. And this guy was a retired fireman, and he was out walking his dog called Samson, right? So you can imagine this guy, he was actually going to go for a run that day, chose to walk his dog instead. Probably the worst, definitely the worst mistake of his life. I feel for him for even making that choice, to be fair. And a car drives past him, hits the brakes aggressively, and Joanne jumps out of the car. And bear in mind, this is broad daylight. It's 3 p.m. right? So we're in the middle of the day. There's no cover of darkness or anything. And she immediately starts attacking Robin. She stabs him several times. And unimaginably, I don't know how this happens, but Robin is still conscious while she's stabbing him. And he actually has the sort of wherewithal to say, why are you attacking me? And again, she actually just says, because I can. Can you imagine this woman? And apparently she's smiling during this time as well. Can you imagine how you'd react to that?
Well, you speak about her smiling. Actually, this incident made Joanne very angry, because what you've got to remember here is this is the first time that she has attacked someone, attempted to murder someone, and she has not been on her own. She's not been in a comfortable closed off space where she's not going to be interrupted. She's done this in broad daylight, and that means that she has to flee the scene without knowing whether or not she has done what she set out to do, which is to obviously take his life. And I think that definitely means that when she enters the car again with Gary Stretch, she is still hungry. She's still hungry for blood, in essence, isn't she?
Yeah, she is. And Stretch, very much like he has been this entire time, is within her spell. And actually, weirdly, I think getting a kick out of the killings himself. Like, there's something about that where he approves of what she is doing and very much wants to facilitate that. So they go and they try and hunt for another victim. Stretch knows the area, as you say earlier on. And so he goes, I know that there's a common in which there are lots of dog walkers, and this is her modus operandi. Has to be a man with a dog. So she finds another dog walker. This is where she meets John Rogers. He is 64 years old. And again, he is out walking his dog. Joanna says, I want to do more. I want to find more victims. And so she goes straight over to him, goes up behind him and stabs him from behind. He had no awareness that this woman was coming towards him, and he falls to the ground. She continues stabbing him, but now in the chest, and in total he actually has 30 different stab wounds, which is just absolutely ridiculous. She thinks that he's dead at this point, and so she takes the dog away from him and effectively leaves the scene.
Yeah, they actually then kind of mooch about the area, but I think it's a services station that they end up being apprehended by the police by. It's worth noting that they are apprehended by the police within an hour of the first attack. So not within an hour of the stabbing of John Rogers, within an hour of the first attack, which shows how quickly the two attacks were carried out.
And also fair play to the police for having to track this car down, follow them and identify them within an hour.
However, right, definitely fair play to the police, but she didn't put up much of a fight, nor did Gary Stretch, by the way. Very, very relaxed when being arrested by police, and by all accounts went quietly. So much so that this is literally her being booked in at the police station.
Attempted murder and murder. Good work. I'm a big fat black dog. It's my right. It's alright.
Yeah, I'll pluck them.
Go right up.
So yeah, this is something that we have become quite hardened to, and we're not that shocked by anymore because we've studied the behaviour of so many killers and how they behave in the immediate aftermath. But for someone who maybe isn't an avid true crime follower or isn't into this sort of stuff, they would be so shocked to know that that is a woman who has literally murdered 3 people and attempted to kill another 2 people. She is laughing, she's joking, she's seeming relaxed, she's almost flirting to an extent, but most importantly, she's showing no remorse. And at this point, she's actually unaware of how many people she's killed, isn't she?
Yeah, she is, because what unimaginably, and I cannot fathom how this is possible. The 2 men that she's just forensically attacked, Robin and John, they both survive the attack, which is just absolutely ridiculous. Robin, obviously, was the first stabbing. He had potentially and should have been life-threatening injuries. He had a collapsed lung, and he actually had blood in his chest cavity as well. And he'd also fractured a rib. She'd stabbed him so hard, I think it fractured the shoulder bone at the back of his body as well. So, like, incredible damage that he had on him. And I don't know how, but basically ambulance get there and they managed to save his life. And considering he was such a robust man, people have described him as a former fireman, being particularly strong. Apparently after that attack, he was a shadow of his former self, and no one can blame him for doing that as well. And then John Rogers, again, his lungs collapsed as well. He had 9 fractures of the ribs. His bowel had been perforated and exposed, and he'd also had lots of defensive wounds to his hands. But even through all of those injuries, he crawled 100 yards, found someone who then called an air ambulance, and was basically able to survive from that point, which is just absolutely unimaginable. And fair play to both those guys for having the sort of like the survival instinct within them to keep going, because that attack, a lot of people would have just passed away.
Unfortunately, John Rogers himself, he did actually pass away within a year or so of the attack. I think it was under a year, actually.
It was a related illness.
Of the attack. Well, this is disputed. Quite a lot of people say of an unrelated illness. I just don't see how it can be unrelated. Like, when you look at, what can be brought on by, in comparison to a frenzied attack, minor levels of stress, what that can do to your body, and what illnesses and potential bad things that can do to your body. I find it a stretch to say that it was unrelated. Yeah,
we saw that in the case of the man that killed his 6 kids. Who was the victim there? One of the mum. Do you remember that? The mum that basically...
Mick Philpott.
Yeah. So that was really
the mother that he attacked of his former partner, she went on to pass from related injuries. So it does very much happen. Should we get on to the court case and the sentencing? Because obviously at first, Joanne wants to give no comment, okay? So she's very much happy to flirt her way through and have almost camaraderie and banter with the police officers. And by the way, is one thing worth noting, right? If anyone ever watches that footage and thinks like, why are the police being so nice to her? That's what they're told to do.
They're doing it intentionally.
You very much...
You're trying to get as much information as you possibly can out of a potential criminal.
Yeah. So if ever someone comes into a police station, you see some CCTV footage and you think, hold on, this person's a monster. Why are the police being nice to them?
It's good cop.
Remember, that's what they're supposed to do. That ultimately helps us get the most out of these murderers and criminals and stuff like this. But as for Joanne Dennehy, I should say, we keep going to say Joanna because when the news was first...
She used Joanna as an alias, effectively, didn't she?
Joanna was what she was known as at first, but since it's been changed to Joanne Dennehy, and in the trial, it was Joanne Dennehy. Obviously, she goes no comment, doesn't she? She goes completely no comment.
So when she was booking in, she was talking a lot and obviously did share a lot of information. But when she gets in the interrogation room, she has asked a series of questions and just says no comment to every single one. So she's got, you can see the duality of her character here in that she knows that she's under a very serious situation and doesn't reveal a lot. But what we get into in terms of the court case is we're expecting her to plead not guilty because the barrister, she's had a conversation with her barristers and they go into the case and they're preparing the case for the fact that she's going to say not guilty. They're going to go to a trial and a serious trial.
What would you think? Obviously, we don't know, but what do you think they would? Do you think they'd have gone down the whole insanity route? Because that's the usual.
I think that would be the only defense you could possibly go for. Diminished responsibility via insanity. Yeah, that would be the only thing you could possibly say. Do
you know? Obviously, we'll get on to what was said and what wasn't said in court, and this wasn't something that was said in court. It could have been something that could have came to light. But do you know with the first 3 men, Joanne actually did claim to have a motive for those stabbings?
I haven't heard that she said that she had anything to do with it. She said that she had a motive.
Her exact words?
Yeah. What were they?
They shouldn't have tried it on with me.
Oh, she was saying that it was a defensive action, was she?
Now, remember this. What did she tell Kevin Lee when she first met him? Why did she do her time in prison?
She said that it was self-defense because of an abusive fatherly relationship.
Which was?
Made up.
Made up. It was a lie. It was a lie. So when she says, they shouldn't have tried it on with me, fuck off.
I mean, also the court have all the text messages and everything, by the way, as well, so they can see it. So the huge surprise in the courtroom was that she actually pled guilty. So there wasn't really a formal trial per se. She confessed to the crimes, said she was guilty, and they went from there.
Probably worth noting although accepting responsibility, accountability and pleading guilty, she showed no remorse in the courtroom. In fact, it was said that she did the complete opposite to that. It was said that she made prolonged eye contact with the victims' families, smirking, laughing as things were said in the court. And when addressed by the actual judge themselves, Joanne said, "Look, I've pleaded guilty. That's all you're getting out of me."
It's brutal. It's brutal, isn't it? She was sentenced and, presumed guilty for all of the crimes that she committed. So the 3 murders and the 2 counts of attempted murder. And that happened in November 2013. By the time she was sentenced, it was 2014, February. And the judge at the time, Justice Spencer, sentenced her to a life term. So she was actually given a whole life order with no ability to be released.
Do you know it was said that when she was given that whole life order, she was the first ever female in the UK to be given that? Did you know that?
It makes sense. I believe there are only 3 women in total that have been given that sentence.
Yeah. So those 3 are Joanne Dennehy, Myra Hindley, and Rose West. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
And also they're now saying that there's one more.
Oh, there may be.
A case that we've covered on the channel.
Who?
Apparently Lucy Letby is
Lucy
under a
Letby?
whole life order.
She will be, yeah.
Yeah.
Guarantee you she doesn't serve it. Guarantee you.
Well, we know that. If you haven't watched the video yet, go and
Definitely
check out that
watch
Lucy,
the Lucy Letby video. Funnily enough, we'll get onto that. But Joanne may have come into contact with Lucy Letby.
Really?
We'll get
Interesting.
onto that.
Release it.
We'll get onto that.
What we've also got to do, we know that Joanne is now facing a whole life order. There were obviously 3 other accomplices that we've got to discuss. So Stretch, we're just going to call him from now on.
Yeah.
He got a whole life order and was completely acknowledged as being an accomplice. I mean, the premeditation, the way that he helped her, it all came out in the trial. And so he very much was given, I'd say, a sentence which should have been a book throwing at him. But actually, he's only got a minimum of 19 years where he could get out. So while he should be in prison for the rest of his life, there is a possibility that he gets out in 19 years.
I would say there's a probability that he
Really?
gets out.
Why?
I don't know how much trouble Stretch is going to get in prison.
Really?
And I think therefore on good behaviour and whatnot. I'm not sure. Look, he might be a target because he's big, but you'd be brave to pick a fight with him. He's 7'3". At the same time as that, the fella's pathetic. Let's be honest.
Pathetic in what way?
This guy, and I'm not using it in the whatever term
Pathetic.
of it. No. This guy is what I would call a melt.
Yeah.
Like a melt, a
Yeah,
drip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wet lunch.
Yeah.
Absolute melt. Because basically, you, my friend, have gone weak at the knees for a bit of skirt. Yeah. And what you've done is not only, when I say you go weak at the knees, yeah, you get these mates and they'll do anything for a woman and whatever. And all of a sudden it's like, hold on, who are you? You've completely changed your character. That's one thing. Yeah. That's acceptable. Okay. If you can be a bit under the thumb, that's acceptable. But when you're aiding this woman and helping her commit murder, that is literally the epitome of why this man is not only not there, yeah, I'm on about mentally, he's also just pathetic. He's a pathetic man.
Yeah.
Really, really pathetic.
Yeah.
Remember as well, Stretch, the 7'3" man, very, very happy to be the accomplice, very, very happy to help, never gets his hands dirty. He never attacks no one. He never does nothing to no one. Why not? You're a 7'3" bloke. You're doing all this stuff for her. Why don't you do some attacking?
Yeah.
You ain't got
But
the
he was
bottle.
under her
bottle.
spell. Yeah.
He's a melt.
He was complete. And he wasn't the only one that was under the
Weasel.
spell. There was Leslie Layton as well, who again completely assisted these 2 as well. He assisted in disposing of the bodies. He assisted in burning out the car as well. And he even took a photograph of John Chapman's dead body as well. So he was very much involved and therefore got a significant sentence of 14 years in prison. Some might argue that that's not significant enough. And he wasn't the only one. There was also Robert Moore, who was the person that effectively helped them when they moved to Hereford. He provided them food and shelter, was effectively implicit in the crime, also involved in the CCTV footage where she sort of hugs him from behind as well in the shop where we were talking about the shop assistants. I think it was proven that he was very much involved. He actually only got a 3-year prison sentence for his involvement. And then obviously there was one other person that was cleared, and that was Mark Lloyd, who was in the car, didn't apparently know about what was going to go on, actually tried to get out of the car, which I only found out recently. He was actually trying to get away from it, lock the car, and he was cleared of all responsibility and actually given no charge and term.
The one thing that the court didn't find out was the motive.
Have you got some theories on this?
Obviously, look, there's the first one, which is what the defence barrister would have gone with, which would have been insanity. Yeah. There was actually a psychiatric assessment done on Joanne at Peterborough Hospital a year before the killing spree took place. They did not deem her a threat to society.
Why? Do you know why that search happened? Do you know why they were even...
The psychiatric assessment maybe would have been something to do with getting out of prison, I would imagine.
Yeah, fair enough. So at that time, a paid psychologist, knowing what we know about her, didn't deem her to be a threat.
No.
That's insane.
No, but
that's crazy.
What they didn't is they didn't deem her to be insane either.
Yeah, true.
And I don't either. So let's move on to the next possibility. Notoriety?
She did love Bonnie and Clyde. We talked about that earlier on. And so being in the public eye and being, I suppose, on the news might have excited her, potentially.
Yep.
So I think that could be part of it. I don't think that was the main reason why she did it.
So then we could move on to the motive being one of a sexual nature.
Yep. So there was a record that she actually enjoyed and got pleasure out of violence within sex.
Yeah. Now, when we say violence within sex, let me be clear with this.
Delicately.
There's kinks, you know, a little bit, I don't know, a little bit of slap and tickle, they call it in the olden days. Yeah. And then there's what Joanne was into.
Yeah.
She was into
sadomasochism, I think is probably the healthy term to describe it. Effectively harming someone for sexual pleasure.
Yes. And also harming herself. So she was into harming herself during intercourse.
Yeah. And we're saying that we're dancing around this because you've got to be incredibly delicate with the way you describe these things on the internet these days. But yeah, she very much wore the scars of having done that. In fact, there are pictures of her celebrating after some of her kills, where those scars are very clearly described. So
there's a slight flaw in that theory. Why would you then do the 2 dog walkers?
I still think you can get pleasure out of something even if there wasn't a romantic element at the end of it, mate. And unfortunately, I think that's what was going on here. I think what was happening is she saw these people and she was getting a kick out of it, potentially sexually, even when there wasn't the act involved.
Ultimately, we never found out the exact motive, and Joanne hasn't actually given the exact motive. But this isn't where the story ends with Joanne, because when she was actually on remand, she was in a Cat A prison, which is high security, in Surrey, right? So not far from where I am, right? And a prison diary was found of hers. And the contents of that diary was
found
very, very concerning. In fact, they actually graded it as so high up on the threat chart. Yeah, they classed it as a terror offence.
Did they? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So she had written down in her notebook, basically a plan that she had hatched. Some reports along with a fellow inmate, some reports on her own, that she was going to take a guard captive in her cell. When she took this guard captive, she was either going to murder the guard or she was going to amputate the hand or the finger
or both
of the guard, or both, right? This is because in this prison she was in, she had noticed that there was a fingerprint system where basically, you know, your fingerprint will give you access to certain doors and whatnot. And she thought that she could escape from prison by hacking the finger off of one of the guards and then holding that finger up and using it on the fingerprint system.
Mental. She actually got chucked the book at for that. She actually got sent to solitary confinement after that. Did you know that?
Yes, she appealed against that solitary confinement because she thought that it violated her human rights. Yeah. You didn't really care about the human rights of the dog walkers, of the 3 men you murdered, though, did you?
Or the potential prison guard that you wanted to harm.
No, or the prison guard you wanted to harm. So, unfortunately, no one really gives a fuck about your human rights, to be honest, love. Actually, someone would give a fuck about her human rights because she requested in 2018 to marry her prison cellmate. This was a woman named Hayley Palmer, who has since actually been released, but was serving 16 years for robbery. Now, the prison turned that request down. So do you know what then happened?
Go on. I don't.
Herself and Hayley Palmer made a pact, basically, where they wanted to go out together. They were both found in their cell. They were both rushed to hospital, and neither of their plans worked ultimately. And then, as a result of that, they had realised upon the request for marriage and then the pact that they tried together, they realised that they couldn't have these two in a cell together or even in a prison together. And therefore, Joanne gets moved to HMP Low Newton, which is basically the equivalent of HMP Franklin, right?
For women.
Which is known as Monster Mansion. The reason it's known as Monster Mansion is because it holds high profile inmates, right? Ian Huntley, Levi Belfield, Bronson at one point was here.
Cousins.
Wayne Cousins. There's so many high profile inmates held at HMP Franklin, and next door, I mean directly next door, is HMP Low Newton, which holds high profile female inmates. Obviously, like we said, Lucy Letby.
She's in there, is she?
She's in there at the moment.
Wow.
But also another inmate in there is Rosemary West, Fred West's wife, infamous murderer, serial killer. Joanne makes it very, very clear upon entering this prison that she plans to kill Rose West, who's now in her 70s, but is still in this prison. The prison and the prison guards take Joanne's threat very, very seriously. They immediately move Rose West to another prison rather than moving Joanne. So clear to see who they, who they see as the bigger threat at that point.
Wow.
And that is pretty much all we know for the story of Joanne Dennehy. Obviously there is life imprisonment for her, so there's no chance that she does get out, but if her prison diaries are anything to go by, I wouldn't call it a 0% chance, because maybe she escapes one day. Listen, first and foremost, thoughts are with all of the victims affected by this case, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this sadistic person harmed so many people, and so many people that were just going about their daily lives. It's absolutely gutting. So yeah, our thoughts and condolences go out to the victim's family and friends, and we very much hope that Joanne serves her time fully in prison and never gets the opportunity to leave, which ultimately, hopefully, is what the justice system has actually been able to do. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please do make sure to give it a like. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, give the channel a little subscription using that link below. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.